Did I get a haircut to film this video? Yeah, I did. Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Kurluck. This behind me is my very first van build, and I'm going to show you how I built it. It's a 144 low roof Sprinter van. The first thing I ended up doing was taking down the partition out of the front of the van, and this was a bit more tricky than I thought because a few of the screws were stripped. Right after that, I took off the floor and I started cleaning under the floor. And it was bad. I'm pretty sure this was used as a work van before I got it because there's lots of nuts and bolts in the walls and actually a few tools. I kept the original flooring so I could lay it down on my insulation and wooden slats I was using for the subfloor, so I'd have a nice template when I'm putting it back into the van. I also had to seal any holes that were in the floor that the previous owner may have made before I could put anything down. And the subfloor was actually one of my biggest rookie mistakes because I didn't have nearly enough wooden slats and I didn't have any going lengthways of the van. So I had very little mounting points to secure stuff to. Another mistake I made with this floor is I drilled the wooden slats into the van flooring. That's going to cause squeaking later on. I did have a chance to redeem myself for making a floor in a different van after this, and I think I did it a lot better. I'll put some photos on screen for you guys. And I did use glue for that van, so it's a lot more solid than this one. To secure my plywood on this van, I used a mixture of wood glue and staples, put some heavy objects on it, and let it rest overnight. Here's my first go at installing some furring strips where under the bed is going to be, and I just used some self-tapping screws to drill into the van frame itself. I then filled the void of the roof beams up top with spray foam. Here I'm sanding around the wheel wells of the van, so when I fit these boxes, the glue will have a better connection to the floor. I secured these boxes with pocket screws going into the furring strips on the walls and on the inside of the boxes into the floor. Here I'm installing a few more furring strips on the front of the van, and to help it bend to the curvature of the van, I made a jig on my table saw to cut a few slits, and that made it a lot easier to bend. This is day one of installing the Maxxair fan up top on the roof. First thing I had to do was clean the roof. You can see from the before and after photos that it was much needed. I was pretty scared to do this part of the van build, but I cut the hole anyways. I then put some Rust-Oleum on the inside of the cut so it doesn't rust from the inside out. I put the flange on and I screwed it into place. After this, I put the sealant on and let it dry.
Pretty sweet.
Now that the fan is installed, with no leaks, I can get to work on my homemade roof rack. I did this by mounting Unistrut with bolts through factory-made van holes in the roof. Of course I sealed that too. I just used butyl tape and normal sealant. You can see while I'm installing the cable entry gland how I installed the solar panel directly to the Unistrut. To make sure the cables were safely installed, I put in rubber grommets in the roof so vibrations while driving won't cut into the cable at all. I don't recommend doing this, and I won't do it in future vans, but I filled the void of the wheel well with fiberglass insulation. I was trying to save some money, and my uncle had some spare insulation I could use, and since it's pretty boarded up, I thought it would be okay to use. One thing I see a lot of beginner van builders miss is sealing the trim on the outside of their van. These are not sealed by the factory, and it will leak water into your insulation. So I made sure to seal up all the trim. To take these off, you just carefully pry it back with a screwdriver, and then push it back into place once you're done. I'm finally ready to get the bed frame mounted. I did this by mounting a 2x4 right onto the van metal using rib nuts. I don't know if this is really needed since it's inside the van, but I put more Rust-Oleum on the bare metal just in case. It took a bit of work to get the rib nuts and the holes in my 2x4 to completely line up, but once I got it, it fit really nicely. I continued on late into the night to get the other side mounted. This one was a bit more tricky because I actually had a rib nut spin on me, and I spent a long time trying to fix that, but I did end up getting it figured out, cleaned up my tools, and I started putting the 2x4s in their respective slots. If you're worried about the strength of the bed, don't worry, I reinforce it later in the video. Insulation time. I used rock wool for this van build, and it is yet another regret I have. If I were to go back and do it again, I would have used 3M Thinsulate. That being said, 3M Thinsulate is a lot more expensive than rock wool, and I could get rock wool at my local hardware store. I'm currently building another van as I'm doing a voiceover for this video, and the insulation is going to be super superb in that van, so stay tuned for a build video on that van. I should have also put the insulation on first before the furring strips. It made it very hard to get insulation behind there, and I kind of scrunched it up, which I know isn't very good. For certain areas, I just used 3M adhesive spray so it would stay in place very easy. For the roof, I used Durafoam. Online, I saw a few people using expanding foam along the sides so it will expand and hold the foam in place. So that's what I did. Right above the wheel well is where I'm going to be putting all my electronics, so I wanted to add some extra brace where I could drill the components into. Under the bed, I just wanted a lightweight material to cover the side, so I used a 2.7mm plywood. When putting this in, I made sure that my solar panel cables were through the wall, and then I secured it with some staples into the furring strips. Time for some electricity. I had 3 100 amp hour Renogy batteries, and I'll link my entire electrical system down in the description if you want to look at it. Without the wall or ceiling on yet, I took this opportunity to wire up the van. In the time lapse, I'm currently wiring the lights that are going to be above the bed. Before this, I wired together all my components for the electrical system. It took up 100% of my concentration, so I forgot to film. It's hard to build a van and film at the same time, especially because when I was building this van, I didn't have a tripod or any filming equipment. Finally, we get to put the ceiling on. I used tongue and groove paneling for this that I painted white. If I were to do it again, I would use shiplap, and I would use one consistent piece that goes throughout the entire van. Doing it the way I did leaves a nasty connection between the two, and I had to deal with it later on in the van build. As I was putting the roof in, I was wiring in my lights, and it was amazing to see the first sign of light in my van. This part of the build was so exciting for me because I could finally envision what it was going to look like. I think it's very important to showcase your successes, but I also think it's very important to showcase your mistakes. And if you look up in the roof, one of my mistakes was putting so many screws in the roof. It looked really bad, and I had to cover it with a piece of wood afterwards. And now we finally get to see the contrast between the warm white ceiling and the dark cabiny walls. If you haven't realized already, or just don't know them, the color scheme of this van was heavily influenced by Trent the Traveler. I've been watching him for about 3 years now, and he is a huge inspiration for this van build, and for any going forward. I didn't use any glue on the walls and ceiling, just in case someone might have to take it down afterwards and fix a cable or two. Putting on these walls was such a huge milestone for me. It looked so cool in my opinion, and having a light switch to turn on and off the lights was just such an incredible experience. Under the passenger seat, I installed a Chinese knockoff diesel heater. It works great, it still works to this day. A little bit of a rat's nest of the cables under the seat, but nobody's going to see that. It was about this time in the van build where it got very difficult for me to film, so you're going to see lots of jumps in time, and I apologize for that. I wish I filmed more. Anyway, what I'm doing here is I'm making the frame for a seat/drawer. This drawer is going to be a pretty big one, so it's going to hold a butane stove and all your pots and pans. Heading into my very messy workshop, I'm cutting out the faceplate, which is going to separate my garage from my living area. This piece had lots of intricate parts, so I had to make sure everything was right. Lots of putting in the van, seeing that didn't fit, bringing it back in the workshop, making a small cut, putting it back in the van, and repeating it over and over again. I needed something to cover the back windows of the van, so I used that 2.7mm plywood again. I'm lucky that my van came with 2 already in the window, so I used the old ones as a template to cut it out. Here's another mistake incoming. I sanded these boards in a weird way where when I stained them, it left a big cross. My van's sliding door had a really hard time opening and closing, so I had to take off the step and put on a new cable snake, and that fixed the issue. It opened and closes now with no issue. I was very proud of myself for making this sliding pantry. It turned out super nice. You can also get a glimpse of that faceplate that I was talking about earlier just behind me. Starting to frame out the countertop that's going to be closest to the sliding door. And I love this time lapse. It shows me working in relatively good sunny conditions all the way down to pitch black darkness. And I am not a professional cabinet builder. I was following one photo online of a guy using 2x3s to frame out his cabinetry. And now I'm making the little part that extends downwards onto the step. I wanted to make this part removable even if it was difficult, just in case someone needed to replace that cable snake again. This area was really hard to get right, but I think in the end I was able to do it quite well. And I also believe it adds a little bit of character to the van as well. Here I got lucky once again. My family was redoing the flooring inside our house, and they happen to have one more extra box of flooring that just happened to match the design of my van. I spent so much time working on these drawer faces and cabinet faces. I think it was well worth it though, because in my opinion, I think it looks awesome. I did eventually have to replace the horn in the van because my old one didn't work. And this video cuts off short because my phone actually ran out of storage. My dad here was helping me put up some shelves. We actually ended up taking these out because I ended up not liking them. Go for it. This is what's going to be replacing the shelves. After a bit more thought, I realized overhead cabinets were the better option. I used a few 2x2s and then put some plywood on top and routed it flush. And this is one of the things people don't account for time-wise when building a van: painting and staining. It takes way longer than you think it'll take. And now factor in waiting for these to dry and doing a second coat waiting for that coat to dry. It takes a long time. In my experience, it can turn a 2-hour job into an all-day job. To secure the upper cabinet to the roof, I used a little bit of wood glue and some long screws to go into the furring strips in the ceiling. I also used pocket holes and screws to secure it to the wall. Here's another part of the van build that takes up an extraordinary amount of time. If you're doing intricate cabinet faces, these take forever to do. If you're making cabinet faces similar to mine, the steps go like this. First, of course, you need your painted door and your stained pieces of wood. Then, you have to measure out the stained pieces of wood to make sure they're centralized on your door. After that, you can wood glue them in place. I also used some brad nails. Then I put some wood filler into the holes of the brad nails and had to restain the front of it. In this scenario, I didn't have short enough brad nails, so I had to cut the excess off and repaint the back. We are so close to the end of this van build. One of the last things I had to do was put on the faces of these upper cabinets. I was super happy with how these came out and was really glad that I replaced the shelves for these. One last mistake, I put my battery monitor too high, so when I was building the upper head cabinet, I had to make it very short. And with this done, I can finally give you guys a tour of the van. So that was the tour. Let me know what you guys thought of it down in the comments below. And I do have another build series coming soon. I'm currently working on a new van. So if you're looking to find some new content on some guy building a van, this might be the channel for you. And if you've made it this far into my first video, I can't say enough times how thankful I am for you. I truly do appreciate all of you. With all that said, I'm gonna take a quick walk around this lake and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.